So welcome to this episode of Cancast. We're joined today by a man who needs absolutely zero introduction, the fabulous Professor Mike Barnes. He's a consultant neurologist and cannabis specialist and is displaying some absolutely beautiful canatonic behind him in his picture, which for those of you that don't know is a very, very nice, beautiful high CBD strain, which I generally rate for sort of low level inflammation and stuff like that. So hi Mike.
Hello. How are you? Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for agreeing to join us. I'm pretty sure everybody who's anybody in cannabis already knows who you are. But would you like to just introduce yourself to those who don't?
No, very pleased to. I'm Mike Barnes, and I was a neurologist, professor of neurological rehabilitation, which is always far too long. So I worked for many years with multiple sclerosis people and people with brain injuries. And then very briefly got interested in the use of cannabis about 20 plus years ago, when my MS people were coming to say, well, I'm using cannabis and it helps my pain and my spasticity. And I asked people coming to the clinic, and about half were using cannabis at the time, but those admitted it to me. And of course, it was well illegal then. It still is in that sense. But I thought this is interesting. There must be something to it. And then by chance, because of my work in spasticity, GW Pharma asked me to be involved in the development of what turned out to be the first licensed cannabis medicine, Sativex. And I was the sort of guy who signed off the dossier for what is now the MHRA. I think it was a different name then. I didn't have much to do with it after that, and Sativex wasn't much used in the medical space, because NICE, in its wisdom, said it wasn't cost effective, and so it really wasn't available effectively on the NHS. And then it was about 4 years ago now, believe it or not, I was asked again out of the blue to do a report for the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Drug Policy Reform, which I did with my daughter, who should be involved more in the cannabis field, but she's a psychologist and wanted to keep working in the NHS. So that was that, and then I was asked around soon after that to become involved with getting the license for Alfie Dingley, Hannah Deacon's and Drew's son. Worked with End Our Pain campaign and helped them get that. It was pre-law change, so it was a Schedule 1 license. In those days, that was summer 18. And as a result of that, of course, the law changed in November 18, and I've now stopped neurology. I've sort of retired as a doctor now, which is a bit of relief in many ways. And I really just do cannabis consultancy work we do with Hannah, run the Medical Cannabis Clinicians Society, still do media and lobbying and lots of bits and pieces, really, which is fun. It's been entertaining for years, to say the least.
I bet it has.
A lot of good. I've met some wonderful people, some great people, met some less great people. In this space, there's a lot of interesting characters, some doing it for the right reasons, some doing it for the wrong reasons. So it's been a very entertaining 4 years, Carly. I'm sure you'd agree that it's an entertaining field to be in.
It is, and that's a good point, actually. You know, there are a lot of people in this space that have sort of walked in from other fields hoping to earn a quick buck, and don't actually understand this medicine or understand the patients that are using it or understand anything really about why it is that, you know, people like us have dedicated our time and our career to trying to push it forward. It's a weird space. It is a very strange space to be in.
There's a lot of ignorance as well. Particularly the CBD sector. CBD is very fashionable. I think that's the right word for it. And there's a lot of companies. Some are really, really good, niche, smaller companies that might not exist after the novel foods debacle, but some really, really good people. I mean, equally some people in the CBD space who really just made to make a quick buck and absolutely no idea what they're making or selling, frankly. And the most surprisingly ignorant group I've come across are my fellow doctors, who are, I don't mind people being ignorant, Carly, as long as they admit they're ignorant.
Yeah.
and want to learn, you know. But there are many doctors, I'm sorry to say, who are ignorant, don't know they're ignorant, don't know what they don't know, and don't want to know what they don't know. And I think that's a shame, and they're stopping the progression of the cannabis medicine as a prescription.
Mm.
Some of the, particularly the hierarchical medical bodies like the Royal College of Physicians, NICE, British Paediatric Neurology Association, have been the most difficult and awkward people I've come across that are stopping this medicine from getting more broadly used.
So what's all that about? Is it the common sort of theme that I see in this stigma in this space is that I think it takes a lot for somebody to go back on their views that they have publicly announced. So this is a harmful substance, it does damage to communities. You know, the lines that we quite often see, the way that we're going to move forward is by those people standing up and saying, oh, well, I've looked at the evidence and actually I was wrong. And it seems to me that that bit is the bit that's the hurdle. What do you think? What's holding us back? What is this stigma? What is it about?
I think there's two main answers. One is ignorance and the stigma that's gone with it. You know, cannabis is bad, and it's only been since, as you know, since the 30s or 40s. But nevertheless, the current generation of doctors, probably two generations now, have viewed cannabis as a bad thing that causes people to go psychotic and funny in the streets. And that's quite a big, I didn't realize how much of a psychological gap there was to jump for people to think, actually, this is a medicine, and it's a really interesting, very exciting medicine, and they can't admit that. I think the other thing is pharmaceuticalizing. I mean, doctors, and I was one of them, really very pharmaceutically orientated. If I was a doctor in the up to about 1930s, botanical medicine was medicine. It was all about plants and related things. But then the pharmaceutical industry came along, and really nothing is deemed now suitable or proper unless it's jumped through the pharmaceutical hoops and is a pharmaceutical medicine. And I think there's a big, particularly the older doctors, I have to say, to generalize, don't really accept that a plant can actually be as good as a proper pharmaceutical medicine that's jumped through double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. And that's the old guard. And it's largely the old guard. I think what this must be nonsense. It's nothing. It can't work. It can't be a thing. It's what do you call it? Well, it's a placebo. It's a cure-all for everything it can't possibly be, without knowing it works through the endocannabinoid system, and therefore it can have a whole variety of uses in different bodily functions. And they can't accept that this cannabis to be accepted to them has got to jump through pharmaceutical hoops. And I'm not against double-blind placebo-controlled studies, and GW Pharma have done those for Epidiolex and Sativex, and good luck to them. But we should accept a botanical does have a value as a medicine. That, believe it or not, is Alexa butting in. Did I ask you to butt in?
Has she got anything good to say, Mike?
I don't know what she's saying. I didn't say Alexa, did I?
Maybe she's just got...
I'm going to pull your plug out if you're Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
They're lovely. They're great fun. They're pretty useless, frankly. Anyway, moving on from Alexa. Yeah, I think it's because it's not a pharmaceutical. It hasn't jumped through the pharmaceutical hoops, and people just don't accept it as a proper medicine. I think that's very sad, and I think it does need a bit of someone who's prepared to say I was wrong, or prepared to listen, and more particularly listen to the consumer, listen to the customer, who go out and say, this is helping me.
Yeah.
And I've never understood, because a lot of cannabis helps people with chronic problems, chronic pain, chronic anxiety, chronic epilepsy, etc. And there's nothing in the pharmaceutical armory that can help them. And they said, well, I've tried this and it really works for me. And they said, oh, no, it doesn't work. It must be placebo. You can't do that. And you get people saying, well, you can't use unlicensed medicine. It's just not right. And I just fundamentally disagree with those people.
Yeah. But we also don't have one pharmaceutical that can address all of those needs and all of those different conditions. Yeah. It's just so versatile and incredible, this plant. And I guess we're only just now understanding what it's capable of, and how exciting is that? And I'm surprised that there aren't more sort of scientists and doctors like yourself who became interested in it from patient reports, who are just excited about the potential of it,
Well, it
like you
should
were.
be exciting about it. Yeah, there's so much to it. There's we know a bit about THC and CBD, don't we, Gully? But, there's 147 cannabinoids.
Yeah.
Do we know much about the 145 others? The answer is no. And I think things like CBG, CBC, CBN have a real role to play, let alone the terpenes, which I think are also wildly forgotten. Myrcene, limonene, linalool all have a role to play. So there's so much exciting to explore in this plant. Doctors should be excited by it and embrace it. And some are kind of say, let's just do studies first. I can sort of see that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see it. And some will just dismiss it without even thinking about it, which is sad.
I'm a great believer in sort of terpene, different ratios of terpenes having different therapeutic effects, and I think that's something that isn't widely known really by the medical profession. And I guess at the moment on private prescription we've got a handful of strains, which is better than no strains for those that can afford it. But I don't know that we're ever going to be able to create a library that will satisfy everybody's needs, and I don't think we really understand what that library should be or what it should look like.
No, I think that's right. What we could do with, and what a couple of organisations are doing, MedCan Support and the Society, Medical Cannabis Clinician Society, what we're trying to do is a little project where we just analyse what's in everything.
Yeah.
Because you ask the producer and they say, well, it's got this amount of THC, this amount of CBD, but they don't tell you anything else.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're hiding anything. They just don't think it's, I don't know why, but they don't think it's valuable or interesting. But if we just know what's in the things, then we can work out when we've got significant numbers of patients, what does linalool added to a strain help epilepsy is just one example, or not. There's a lot we don't know about, but we should be exploring. And the only way you can explore that is to know what's in the stuff you're prescribing.
Absolutely. And I think that the patients at the moment, or the consumers that are not cannabis naive, who have maybe been like me through a lot of strains and understand what works, they could go to a doctor and say, look, these 5 strains will absolutely nail my spasticity. Can you tell me what that strain is that you're prescribing me? And the producers don't tell the doctors, so the doctors can't tell the patients, and that's all about protecting their genetics and protecting their sort of business model. And that's going to be frustrating for people who have spent years and years and years trying to work out what's working for them. And it's a sort of interesting conundrum. I wondered what your view was on. One of my ideas was to maybe use a large-scale observational trial where we let patients sort of feed in on a symptomatic sort of management basis, where they report what strain they may be using, what condition they're using it for, and then we sort of anonymously ask them to say, okay, so I was in spasm, it was a 9 out of 10, I vaporized for 4 minutes, now it's a 2 out of 10. This is the strain profile I'm using. And then we could start to see, okay, so MS patients are favouring, heavy indica strains with linalool, or they're favouring oils over flower, or, we could start to see what's helping people. And that would mean that patients with MS, for example, could go onto a site and see, okay, so 80% of MS patients are using these strains. So it could sort of help them.
Simple, really. I mean, I hope the 2021 drug science program will move in that direction, because they're now doing that. But they do need to analyze what's in the strains as well, which I think they need to help with that. But you're right. If you think about it worldwide, if we got some sort of global registry, now there would be millions of people in that registry. And if we knew how, just at a very simple level, not academically confusing or complicated, what strain you're on, how much you're taking, how are you taking it, how does it help? And we know such a huge amount of information. It's a shame. It's a shame that's not happening. I hope it will happen. There are people like researcher in Israel who's got Dedi Mary's got thousands of information of patients, and that's what we need. We need more we need more cooperation in this field. And I know commercial interests come into it, and it's et cetera, but if people would just cooperate more, I think we get further quicker.
Absolutely, and that's something I'd like to look at. I mean, we've got a cohort of, I don't know, 19,000 registrations for Cancard, and I think that's a really good basis for opening up this conversation and for them submitting their experiences. And I might, I might come and speak to you about that, and I might speak to Deddy as well about how we can best sort that out. Obviously, people are concerned about sharing their data and things like that, and that's fine. We wouldn't necessarily need that, but what we would need is just patients willing to give their insight for the future of this medicine, for the future of people with that condition that they're struggling with.
Yeah,
I think it would make for a bit of a decent sort of observational study that isn't an RCT. I can't understand how an RCT can be completed on cannabis.
it can't. It
Yeah.
can't. I don't think so. I mean, if you can do an RCT on a 1 molecule, maybe 2 molecule pharmaceutical product against placebo, fine, I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
But you can't do that with a plant. Well, you can do it with a plant, but you can. Which strain do you pick? What method do you take? You be here. I worked it out at some point years ago for a silly comment in a talk. It was about 1,000 years.
Yeah, 900 years I worked out. Maybe my maths was crap.
No, you're right. I mean, every strain, every combination of every strain for every different indication. That's what you do for pharmaceutical. Like Sativex is just for MS spasticity.
Yeah.
They haven't tested it for spasticity after stroke.
Yeah.
Or spinal cord injury, or whatever it is. So if you multiply all the strains by all the indications, you'd be here, well, you and I will be long, long gone. Somebody 1,000 years hence will be still having this discussion with the pharmaceutical industry. So it ain't going to work. It doesn't lend itself to pharmaceuticalizing itself, if that is a word.
No, I mean, unless they isolate the compound and then.
Well, yeah, absolutely, you can.
But I mean, but then you're not testing. You're not testing cannabis.
You're not testing cannabis. You're testing as nothing academically, scientifically. Yeah, let's take CBC. Let's see what it does, and that's interesting academically speaking. But you're not testing cannabis. You're testing CBC in isolation, and that's my problem with isolates. Mm-hmm. I know why they've done it clearly, but it's not testing cannabis, as you quite rightly say.
In speaking of isolates, you mentioned earlier about the new sort of novel food CBD regs. What are you? I've got some strong views on that. I'm sure you can imagine. But what are your views on the the threshold limits, the THC being removed, and the likelihood that we're all going to be either consuming broad spectrum or isolate products off the shelf?
I think that's a huge shame.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely clear. No one sensibly working in this field doubts, let's call it the entourage effect. There's no doubt in my mind from talking to endless people consuming it that the whole plant works better than individual components of the plant. I think that's an absolute scientific given. I don't think it's arguable. It does. So I think it's a shame if we just go down an isolate route. And basically, that's taking cannabis and forcing it down a pharmaceutical route, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's forcing the proverbial round peg into a square hole, or square peg into a round hole, whichever way around the phrase is. It doesn't fit. So, again, nothing wrong with isolates for some conditions, and take Epidiolex, it works great for epilepsy for children, but the whole plant works even better. So why do we want to do something that's not as good as something else? So I'm not against isolates, but I'm against them in isolation from anything else. CBD, I know we needed more regulation in the CBD sector. There was, people producing CBD products that didn't have any CBD in them to start with. So it needed more regulation. But I think there needs to be some sensible balance between making some reasonable wellness medical type claims for what is a natural food supplement product. And I'd love to see that. I'd love to see basically people just saying what's in the bottle should reflect what's on the label and letting the public choose.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
I think
sorry, Carly. Yeah.
No. I was just going to say, I think my biggest concern is for the people who are accessing whole plant products at the moment quite easily and using it quite successfully. my concern is that when those suppliers are forced to remove that very small percentage of THC, that the CBD will become ineffective or
Yes.
much less
Yes.
effective. And for some people that might mean that they're more anxious, which is in itself an issue. But for others, it might mean the returning of pediatric seizures. It might be a real life-changing thing that the Home Office is implementing.
All right.
My concern.
And the other daft thing is the Food Standards Agency put a cap of recommendation of 70 milligrams maximum dosage.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no scientific basis. They could have put that in a random number selector and come up with a number. There is no basis for 70 milligrams whatsoever. And the average dose, take an adult with anxiety, is between 60 and 100 milligrams. Yeah. So they're automatically excluding most people as medical benefit. If you say, I can't take more than 70, when you take 40 or 50, for a proportion of people, it won't do anything of any note. So, there's a lot of nonsense in this field. The Food Standards Agency and the novel foods as a whole it's taken the proverbial sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Yeah.
I just don't agree with it at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know what we're going to see in terms of, I suppose my main concern is the patients on the ground, because it always is. And I suppose we don't know what we're going to see yet. What we've already seen is, some real heavy-handedness even before the regulations have become, the real heavy-handedness from the Food Standard Agency.
And I think there's a move towards big cannabis, in a sense of big pharma, big alcohol, big tobacco. And the people who can afford to go through the novel food stuff to start with, it's what's cost £250,000 plus. Mm-hmm. I know there's some consortium and such like, but it's removing the good quality niche producer. And there's some niche producers who need removing. Yes, they're producing rubbish products. But there's a lot of really good people there doing really good products who would just go out of business. And I think that's a shame. I draw the analogy between what used to be in alcohol. You could get Watney's Red Barrel years ago. The big brewers dominated the field. But now we've got such a wonderful range of craft beers. And that's, it's similar with cannabis. What I'd hate to see is the Watney's Red Barrel of... Right. Sorry, that may be a bit old. Maybe I'm showing my age here. God, we always know, what the hell is he talking about, Watney's Red Barrel? But there was big Fosters, and nothing wrong with them, so before they sue me. But we'll just use we'll lose the richness of the products and the niche of the products if we're not careful in a massive unnecessary regulation.
Absolutely. I just feel like it's a bit of a step backwards when I suppose me and other organisations are trying to move forwards and make this more available.
Yes.
But also limit some of the stress. And I think one of the things that you'll know as a doctor is that, stress, particularly around the legalisation of cannabis, the illegality of cannabis and associated products, causes so much stress for people who are taking this with great benefit that in some cases they're undoing that because they're undoing their hard work because the stress is then doing something to their health condition, which is making it worse, which is something that I just cannot stand by.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I hope that Cancast and other organisations can do something for those patients to sort of limit that stress.
I hope so. Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, actually, and I've been asking everybody this, and it's an interesting question, is if you could wave a magic wand over this whole medical cannabis palaver and have the access system exactly as you want it, what would it look like?
That's a very good question. Sort of two answers. What I'd love to see is doctors embracing it, and it's available to all who need it on the National Health Service. That's point one. I hate it. Just through the private sector because it's so unnecessary. It's costing people who can't afford it a small fortune. And I think that's, nothing wrong with the private sector. 10% of the population might still choose to access it privately for whatever reason, but it really needs to be available on the National Health Service. But then you get the other question, which I know you espouse, is growing our own.
Yep.
And as we've said already, we will get choice with pharmaceutical type prescribable products, but I don't think we're ever going to get the richness of that choice. for a long time. We might eventually, as you said earlier, we might eventually know, doctors might be knowledgeable enough to know that this product with CBC and CBN and CBG is good, and this limonene and linalool and the terpene profile, we might have such a nice range of choice. But we don't have that range of choice, and it's going to be years and years till we do have that range of choice. But people who grow their own can grow what suits their personal condition. And that may be 2, 3, 4, 5 different strains that suit their particular condition at a particular point in time, one for the morning, one for the evening, etc., etc., etc. So I'd like to see that more tolerated. Tolerate is perhaps the wrong word. I'd like to see the law change to allow it to happen. So you've got, not everyone wants to grow your own, not everyone can grow your own. There's families of children who've got enough on their hands, people working. It's not right for everybody, of course it's not, but it's right for some. So I'd like to see a medical approach hand in hand with a personal approach like that. And I know that drifts into the debate about recreational use, which I've always steered clear of for periods of various newspapers in this country attacking me for that. So that's a perfectly good socio-political debate, but I'm not talking about recreational use. I'm talking about grow your own medical use and grow your own prescription medicine. I'd like to see both of those develop hand in hand.
That's interesting because in Canada there was a period of time where Health Canada allowed doctors to essentially write a prescription for a license for patients to grow their own with medical oversight.
Yes.
Which is a sort of interesting take on that whole sort of division between recreational and medicinal use, isn't it? Because there was a sort of medicalization, but then there was the sort of relinquishing of providing the product and allowing that patient to support.
Yeah, get a card. You're eligible for medical cannabis. Here's a card. Then go to someone who knows what they're talking about. And as you know as well as I do, in Canada and parts of the States, there's very, very knowledgeable dispensaries with bud tenders there who can talk much more knowledgeable than a doctor ever will, because it takes an awful long time to learn these things, and doctors have got other things to be doing. And I'd love to see a card. Here you are, you're eligible for your prescription. Now go to someone who knows what they're talking about to find exactly which sort suits you.
That sounds great. If we can make that happen, mate, let's make that happen.
Then I can retire at long last, and once that's happening. But I may be around for another decade or so. Yeah,
we'd like to keep you around,
sadly,
mate.
Sadly. So that's what I'd like to see.
Amazing. That's brilliant. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Okay. Thank you, Carly. Thank
you
for asking me.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you.